So I'm really excited to announce this next panel, and like I said, we moved some things around. So this panel is actually the panel on how to engage foundations and ideas for the foundation community for Giving Tuesday. And we have another change, which is unfortunately Jamie McDonald had to run out this afternoon, so we are welcoming back Sarah Koch to the stage from the Case Foundation. So please join me in welcoming Sarah, Luz Rodriguez from the Foundation Center, and Marley Honkoop from Illinois Donors Forum. Marley is also on the team that's leading I'll Give Big, which is the statewide movement in Illinois, which she'll tell you plenty about. Thanks, guys.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for being here and for letting me spend another 20 minutes with you on stage. As Kate said, this is a little bit of a last-minute thing. So if I look confused at any point, don't worry. I'll figure it out. Luckily, we at the Case Foundation have a little bit of experience with Giving Days and what it means for a foundation to participate. So hopefully that will be valuable. And Marley and Luz, thank you so much for joining me and the whole Giving Tuesday community here today. So our topic is how do you get foundations involved in Giving Tuesday? And it's, I think, one of the bigger questions. And I'd love to start out by hearing a little bit from Marley about what are you seeing out there in terms of foundations that are doing this well, foundations that aren't. There's so many different kinds of foundations, right? We have the corporates, we have the family foundations, the private foundations, community foundations. Is there a particular group that you see as kind of already being a rock star in the Giving Tuesday space? Are there groups that are a little bit slower to come on board?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question, and I would definitely say first off, as you probably all could guess, is that our corporate foundations are going to be the first to jump in and say, we love Giving Tuesday, because you can use it in a way that you're able to partner, they're able to show that they care about the community, they're also able to put their name on it, there's some good co-branding that can happen. So I think corporate foundations are definitely going to be the first that jump in and say, yeah, sure, let's figure out how we can partner on this. The next is going to be family foundations, I think, and private foundations. I think a family foundation, they have a little bit more sway. They're able to kind of go with, they do normally have some sort of issue areas that they focus on, but they'll give matching grants to their grantees typically, and especially because there's different family members that feel certain ways about different things, and so they have a little bit more heart, I guess, or attachment. And then I would say private foundations, same thing. And then lastly, I think the most difficult one to come on board so far has been community foundations, and I think that's historically come from the different giving days that happen nationally. And so I think that the reason that we see it to be difficult to have the community foundations come on board is because they're kind of afraid and don't know what to do with Giving Tuesday in terms of they don't want one person just benefiting off it. They're very community focused, and so if they think that some sort of giving platform is benefiting like specifically for it, then they're a little bit ambiguous. But I think the way to kind of go about and address this is that it's not a giving day, this is a giving movement. And so there's not one organization, there's not one company that's benefiting from it. It's all of us. It's our entire nation. And as you can see from, I don't know who saw the Giving, is it the Giving USA that just came out? The 5.7% increase in individual giving, over between 2013 and 2014. That's kind of something to talk with them about too, and to say, hey, this could have something to do with Giving Tuesday. This just started 3 years ago. Do you think it's a coincidence? And kind of bring them on board to show that, we're not just trying to benefit, we're doing this for the entire community.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree, and I think that, it's so hard when you're building a movement to figure out, well, how do you actually get all of the stakeholders that you need that are part of the movement on board with what's happening, right? And it's going to take a different amount of time with all of them. And I think a lot of it is listening to what they need. And I think that what we've heard overwhelmingly from community foundations is that they care about the hyper-local. And the other Giving Days that have been happening so far are hyper-local, and Giving Tuesday appears like it is an international movement. But as we've seen in communities like Baltimore and Illinois, that also can have such a great hyper-local focus. And so I'm really encouraged by the fact that the local movements that are happening within the broader Giving Tuesday movement will hopefully bring community foundations on board. If there are any community foundations out there on Twitter that would like to chime in of, what are you seeing in your communities? What are your plans for Giving Tuesday this year? We'd love to also hear from you. So, quick Twitter call, community foundations, tweet at us what's exciting in your space. But I'd love to hear, when we're thinking about how do you get these stakeholders on board? How do you reach out to foundations? Lucy, when we were talking before, I think that you would use the word courting foundations, right? Because we have to court stakeholders. You have to convince them, just like you do with donors, that this is a valuable thing to donate to. When you're talking about partners, you have to take the same tact of this is why this is a valuable partnership to have as well. So what are some of the ideas that the Foundation Center is considering in terms of courting foundations to join the Giving Tuesday team?
I think what we advise nonprofits, because that's what we do, we advise nonprofits on how to successfully fundraise. The approach should be a tailored approach. If we're going to talk about community foundations, I think that we need to look at, there's a saying in our field, if you know one foundation, you know one foundation. And so you can't just group them all together. You can't even group all community foundations together. So it should be by program officer, by the individuals within those community foundations, by their interests, because the overall foundation may have their giving days, but you need to seek and court the individuals that have a relationship with the organization, and the ask doesn't necessarily have to be being upfront with Giving Tuesday. It could be, can you help us on the back end with some capacity building around social media, technology, public relations, especially if you're a grantee, there is interest in supporting grantees in their efforts. You just have to be really creative and specific about what the ask could be. And quiet as it's kept, community foundations also give internationally. I never knew that until I looked at their giving distribution. And so although we kind of make a generalization about community foundations, that they're hyper-local, we need to learn a little bit more about them and their more expansive geographic focus, and then connect your cause to their geographic focus if there is one. And another brainstorm idea that was coming to me was thinking back, since Giving Tuesday is towards the end of the year, thinking back at what major events happened that year. Usually, it's a tsunami or an earthquake or, Superstorm Sandy or even 2 years past. I mean, we still have people that need help from Superstorm Sandy. And so connecting their interest in those causes by reminding them on Giving Tuesday. So it's just some ideas that
So
they might.
It sounds similar to a little bit of what we were talking about in terms of knowing your audience for the individual donors, that you can also know your audience with the foundations, right?
The same principles always apply.
The other thing that I love that I feel like we don't talk about nearly as much is planning ahead of what other support that you might need for Giving Tuesday, right? We're always thinking about what are we doing on Giving Tuesday? How are we engaging our donors on Giving Tuesday? How can we use foundation support on Giving Tuesday? But a lot of what you're saying is about, the anticipatory efforts, right? It's about how can you build capacity to actually run your Giving Tuesday campaigns. And that's why we're here in June talking about Giving Tuesday, because you can start reaching out to foundations now and saying, okay, great, we maybe already have a relationship with you, and we'd love to leverage that a little bit more to do some advanced planning and some capacity support so we're ready for Giving Tuesday this fall.
Yeah.
And you can have that conversation about, is it capacity or is it day of support, right? All we hear about publicly is the matching grants that foundations are doing, right? Like that's kind of the biggest thing. If you say, what are foundations doing on Giving Tuesday? Oh, they're doing matching grants. But I think, as Luce is saying, it's so much deeper than that. And there are a lot of things that are happening in the foundation space ahead of Giving Tuesday to prepare nonprofits that I think that we can leverage a little bit better and ask for a little bit more specifically. I would also like to talk about beyond the matching grant. I think that there are a lot of foundations that do that. Amazing things happening with Microsoft Youth Spark and Global Giving in terms of leveraging huge matching grants on their platform on Giving Tuesday. The Case Foundation did a couple of smaller matching campaigns the first 2 years of Giving Tuesday, just allowing anybody to come in and donate to a nonprofit they cared about with various incentives. But I also think it's interesting to think about what are foundations doing on Giving Tuesday day of outside of the matching campaign. And Marley, you said that there were some foundations that came to you guys at the Illinois Donors Forum last year and said, we want to do something, but we don't want it to be matching. What should we do? Can you walk us through how that came about?
Yeah, so let me just, so for Donors Forum, we weren't raising any money for ourselves. We were community organizers, so we were organizing the movement in Illinois, so we didn't benefit at all. So as part of our structure for creating our campaign, we created working groups around different constituencies and stakeholders that we wanted involved. And so one of those was funders, and we had one family foundation, the Coleman Foundation, that was really excited about it, and they came to us and they were like, we really think we should do Giving Tuesday, and I was already thinking about it, and so he and I worked really hard together, and so he brought together a group of kind of a committee around working around getting foundations involved. And so they were kind of huge, I guess you would say, evangelists for I'll Give Big. And so, we had 3 months only that we were planning our campaign. And so, in October, they started talking to other foundations, getting them involved and saying, hey, can you be involved some way? Can you do a matching grant? And they said, well, no, we can't do a matching grant. So then they brainstormed other ways. Well, we can give some money. We can't do a matching grant, but we do have $1,000 that we can take off and that we can give. And so they said, what can we do with that? And they said, well, it'd be really great to get the public more involved. We'd really like to do a public campaign, but we don't know how to do that. And so through brainstorming with our team and them, they said, okay, can you come up with a menu of media options and how much each one would cost? So if we were able to get, X amount of funders to give this amount of money, so 5,000, that would get us, X amount of spots on NPR, or this would get us, on the front page of the Tribune, and have a spread there. And we would do all the legwork. And so they ended up pulling together a good amount of money, and we were able to work with NPR to create spots on Vocalo as well as our regular NPR station. So they all came together. They donated the money to us as their media grant, and then we pooled their money and were able to pay for it. So that was a really cool example of that's not necessarily a matching grant, but it impacts the entire community and highlights the work that their local that our local organizations are doing in Illinois. So that was really cool and really inspiring to watch. And now each of those organizations that initially gave last year just to do the media campaign are thinking about doing matching grants and starting to plan it in there and say, okay, how can we start to help educate our grantees on Giving Tuesday, and is starting that positive support in a way that we weren't expecting. So that's been really cool to watch, and has been a story that has really just kept us going at Donors Forum.
And Marley, your audience at Illinois Donors Forum includes groups like the foundations that you just spoke about. It also includes nonprofits. You're kind of running the gamut. How are you seeing all of those groups coming together? Are there any partnerships that are coalescing? I think there was a statement earlier today that I also saw repeated on Twitter about, look for partnerships with like-minded organizations. How is that working in Illinois right now?
It's been really beautiful to watch, and I can't believe it, over 3 months, how many different groups, whether that's businesses, social partnerships, as well as foundations, our social sector as a whole has really come together to rally around this. I've seen partnerships, obviously with Groupon between certain organizations helping them fundraise. I've also seen for example, one of our community foundations, even though they're unsure of whether they're doing a grant or not, they're at least bringing their grantees together to listen to them and to be able to hear. And so they're starting partnerships within their community to be able to hear, okay, how can we help you with Giving Tuesday? You know, we're not sure if we're going to be able to give out a bunch of money, but how can we start to support and rally people around that? I think within Donors Forum in general, you know, we have our working group that we have meet that has, you know, everyone from the private sector, the business, you know, private sector, social sector, education, bringing everyone together to be able to talk about it and say, how do we create our campaign? And so that's been really cool to watch each of those bring their different perspectives and say, hey, don't forget about this, or hey, I thought of this and this is how we can impact our community. And so from there, I'm going to be in the process of trying to break out what each of our working groups is going to be their goals for this year. And so I think that that's really helpful too. But from there, they create their own working groups, but then they pull in other people from around the community leaders. So it's not, you know, our business working group might not necessarily just be businesses. It could be other key stakeholders that we would have never have thought of. So I think that's really cool. And it's a way that they have all, whether that's foundations or other folks, have really gotten also like great professional development and networking opportunities. So I think there's so much more to that they're learning and gaining, but they're all doing it because they're rallying around this movement, because they see good in it. They see how it's affecting the community. So I think it's a really powerful thing to be able to watch, and I'm just really lucky that I get to like be part of it and watch it. So
I feel like we all feel that way,
Yeah.
right? Like the Giving Tuesday movement is so big and it's going
feel-good
so
movement.
fast that it's just like, oh my gosh, look at all of these amazing things that people are doing. And Luz, I put you on the spot in the beginning of saying, you know, what can we be doing better? But I'd love to give you an opportunity to talk about what amazing things has Foundation Center seen in terms of the Giving Tuesday movement. You know, what has inspired you and kind of given you the warm fuzzies for Giving Tuesday over the last 3 years?
I think that as much as I say you can't generalize about foundations, I think one safe generalization to make about foundations, be they whatever type, is that they like to promote philanthropy. They like the idea of growing philanthropy. They see that as leveraging the work that they're doing. And I think that we're not the only ones getting that warm, fuzzy feeling, that foundations are getting that feel-good feeling, seeing philanthropy emerging out of the grassroots. And I'm sure that there are ways that they will want to help, but it's something that's innovative and new. So we need to be helpful to them and be a resource to them. And maybe not ask for money for Giving Tuesday, but ask how we could be helping them promote how they give, or what innovative ways they want to promote philanthropy. Because this is it's a philanthropic movement coming from the grassroots. And to dovetail on the idea about the multilingual promotions, there are multi-levels of philanthropy in different cultures. And so one possible very attractive campaign, I think, to foundations would be to promote how we give, like give people platforms to talk about how we give, starting with them. You know, asking how could we promote how you give, you know, your story. Because we want to begin storytelling around how we give. And if you go to communities where there are diverse cultures, for example, we all in New York, right? We're in New York because I travel a lot, I'm sorry. Astoria is known to be like one of the most multicultural neighborhoods, yeah? Imagine if we do a video survey of, you know, how do you give in your community, or how do you give in your culture? And just really highlight philanthropy beyond how we define it, and really explore how other cultures give. Foundations would love that, and that could be leveraged. Because there are ways that foundations could help, again, beyond the grant, beyond the matching gift, by building our capacity to do really innovative things. When it's a great idea, they would probably partner with us and or partner with each other. So you mentioned the working groups and the committees. I think that one really good strategy is to find out how to get on these committees or to suggest to foundations, namely your most local foundations, community foundations and family foundations, whether or not they've thought about committees and could we help bring one together. And that's where the ideas spark. And they're really brilliant individuals in the community as well as within the foundations. I think that that's what's so exciting, is that it becomes a person-to-person relational experience.
I love that, and I think it's so easy when we think about other types of partnerships, the logical question of, okay, well, what are your goals? Like, here are my goals. What are your goals? Like, what do you hope to achieve here? And I don't know that we always do that with foundations of saying, so I love what you're saying about what's the foundation's goal for Giving Tuesday?
And how could we be a resource to you?
Absolutely, because partnerships go both ways. And that's something as a reminder for all donors, right? Like, even when you're courting individual donors, thinking about, okay, well, what can they get out of it? Is it feeling close to the work? Is it getting some kind of recognition? Is it starting out by engaging them on social media and then getting to an ask? With foundations, it's the same, right? Of like, what are your goals? How can we be a good partner to you? And then figuring out, is that a monetary partnership? Is that some other promotional partnership? Is it a thought leadership partnership? I think starting out that conversation of, let's just first think about how we can both work to advance this collectively toward each of our goals, and then to go from there. So I love that as, let's just start with a conversation and see where we align. I think that's how we bring more people to the table for Giving Tuesday and how we make this movement even stronger. So I want to wrap by just saying a quick thank you to everyone here today in the room and in the live stream. A huge thank you to Marley and Luce for joining me in this conversation about foundations, and I look forward to seeing more foundations in the Giving Tuesday movement this year and going forward.
That's wonderful. Thank you.